like you're planning to spend a bunch of money in the offseason, and there would be salary cap constraints anyway. I'm just curious.
We're going to spend all the money we have in offseason.
Well, that gets to the question that with new ownership, with the Adelson and Dumont families, what's your sense of their commitment to spending what would be necessary on the player salary front to go where the franchise wants to go?
Yeah, I don't think money's going to be an object. I think it's doing it the right way, bringing in people with good character. The money is not going to be the limiting factor. They want to win. We're going to be smart about it, though. But I don't expect we're not having money conversations.
The Mavericks lose a fan favorite in Derrick Jones Jr., but they acquire Naji Marshall while still remaining in play for Klay. This is Inside the Mavs. Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks Pre and Post Game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. And you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Big thank you to all of you who got us to over 6,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel here at Kevin Gray Sports. Really appreciate the support of my YouTube channel when it comes to Inside the Mavs and the podcast as well. So again, big thank you to all of you getting me to over 6,000 subscribers on Kevin Gray Sports on YouTube. Need that support for the Dallas Mavericks as they lose out on Derrick Jones Jr., but they acquire Naji Marshall, formerly of the New Orleans Pelicans, as Marshall signs a 3-year, $27 million deal, on average $9 million per season, after the Mavericks had to make a pivot after losing Derrick Jones Jr. Derrick Jones Jr., who, of course, last year shot 34% from the three-point line and had a career year for the Dallas Mavericks. He moves on to the Los Angeles Clippers, signing a fully guaranteed 3-year, $30 million deal to go play with James Harden, not Paul George. That's because Paul George has signed a 4-year, $212 million deal to go play with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey with the Philadelphia 76ers. So the Sixers getting their man in free agency after the Clippers moved on, and Paul George decided that they were going to part ways. Now Derrick Jones Jr. will go play with Kawhi Leonard and James Harden, who signed. James Harden did a 2-year, $70 million deal to remain in Los Angeles. But for the Mavericks, we started to hear reporting that there may be some concern about the Mavericks' ability to hang on to Derrick Jones Jr. because we had learned that Derrick Jones had switched agents and was going over to Clutch Sports, and the time frame at which he would be able to start to work with his new agent really cast doubt on the Mavericks' ability to be able to retain him. So with the Mavericks feeling like they were not going to have the necessary and requisite time to be able to work with Derrick Jones, they decided to quickly pivot and move on to Naji Marshall, and their inclinations were correct. Derrick Jones Jr., not long after Naji Marshall agreed to his 3-year, $27 million deal, signed that 3-year, $30 million deal with the Clippers. And for the Mavericks, they have lost their best point of attack defender when it came to Derrick Jones Jr. We know how much of an effect that he had on this Mavericks defense, especially once he was inserted back into the starting lineup, once the Mavericks acquired Daniel Gafford, and you saw the defensive turnaround that the Mavericks were able to make. They became the best defense literally in the league during the final 20 games of the season that helped create what was a spectacular run to the NBA Finals. The Mavericks now have to replace that in terms of their best point of attack defender, but what they are getting in terms of Naji Marshall is a guy that's 6'7" with a 7'1" wingspan at 26 years of age, coming off of his fourth season, a former undrafted and two-way player that carved out a really nice role for himself when he was with the Pelicans, a guy that can really defend and put together a career moving forward that allows him to fit into the timeline that the Mavericks continue to have with a lot of young guys. When you look at the roster that they have, a lot of team-friendly contracts with guys that are very young. We're talking about in the ages of 21 to 22 to 26 years old. We're talking about a 20-year-old in terms of Derrick Lively II. You still got a young Jaden Hardy, who his deal is guaranteed going into next season. You're talking about, obviously, with Luka Doncic. You're talking, obviously, with P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford, each of them 25 years of age. Now you add a Naji Marshall, who at 26 years of age continues to fit inside that timeline, and you still are allowed to have now opportunities to pursue Klay Thompson, but more when it comes to Naji Marshall, a guy, as we mentioned, 26 years old, 6'7", with a 7-foot wingspan, a guy that shot 40.7% on wide open threes last year, shot 39.6% on catch and shoot threes as well, and 42% in the corners from the three-point line. And last year, shooting 38% from three on about 2.5 three-pointers a game with the New Orleans Pelicans. You saw how he continued to grow and really provide you some really good defense on that side of the floor. So a young man who's got a lot of opportunity to grow with this team that fits the identity and the culture that the Mavericks are looking for in terms of a young defender that can stretch the floor from the three-point line and be able to provide you some more depth in terms of your perimeter defense. But the lacking of a point of attack defender is still there for the Mavericks, even with the acquisition of Naji Marshall, which, again, you give Nico Harrison credit for quickly making the pivot and not waiting until something happened with Derrick Jones Jr. and decided to be much more proactive to make the signing. And if you're a Mavericks fan, you appreciate the fact that the Mavericks find ways to continue to move on quickly, make decisions quickly to improve their roster. And for some, based on the acquisition of Naji Marshall, feeling like they've got an upgrade with Derrick Jones Jr., because here's the calculus that you had to make if you're going to bring back DJJ. Was he going to have another similar career year of the way that he had this past year? Guy coming off a year where he signed last in free agency last year, was on a veteran minimum contract going into this upcoming year, and he earned everything that he got. Jason Kidd continuing to fulfill his promise that not only does his teams continue to get better, his players get better, but also getting them paid. Derrick Jones Jr. now another example of that when it comes to him now moving on in free agency. But the Mavericks taking the calculus that not only were they not able to potentially retain him, but also finding a player with upside that was young, that fit the timeline of the Mavericks, and Naji Marshall fits that. And now Derrick Jones Jr. moves on to the Clippers to continue his career, where, again, he will be paid on average $10 million a season. So a good signing for the Mavericks in terms of acquiring Naji Marshall as a replacement that will really be able to fit in nicely with what the Mavericks do. The Mavericks still with work to do when it comes to continuing to improve this team based on free agency. The fact that they were able to move on from Tim Hardaway Jr. to create that $16.2 million trade exception, which we will get to on the other side of the break, because, yes, with the acquisition of Naji Marshall in replacing Derrick Jones Jr., we had already moved on from Tim Hardaway Jr. to acquire Quentin Grimes to be able to fit in as well as a young shooter that continues to improve on the defensive end as well. What does all of this mean for Klay Thompson and the Mavericks' pursuit of him based on what they have available and what we are learning about how Klay Thompson is feeling about what he wants and potentially coming to Dallas, and how LeBron James and the Lakers are already making their play to acquire the Los Angeles native? More on that on the other side of the break. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, thank you for hanging out with us through our spot and through today's podcast partner in Aura. For the Mavericks, they lose out on Derrick Jones Jr., who was priority 1A and 1B, according to Nico Harrison. But at the same time, the Mavericks making a nice pivot to moving on from Derrick Jones Jr. to acquire Naji Marshall. But what does all this mean when it comes to the pursuit of one Klay Thompson, who, of course, is not going to be continuing his career with the Golden State Warriors after playing his first 13 seasons with Golden State, of course, a 4-time NBA champion and one of the most prolific three-point shooters in NBA history. He is being hotly pursued by, of course, the Dallas Mavericks. Other teams include the Los Angeles Lakers as well. But for the Mavericks, an opportunity where they have been making a full court press to acquire Klay Thompson. Again, what we were seeing on Sunday was reporting from individuals like Monte Poole, for example, who are as close to the Warriors as you can get, that the Mavericks were putting on a heavy pursuit of Klay Thompson, and for others feeling like the Mavericks were the front runner. Now, here's where we stand when it comes to the Klay Thompson pursuit. The Dallas Mavericks, who I mentioned, opened up a $16.2 million trade exception. They saw themselves use a lot of their mid-level exception that they had on Naji Marshall. The Mavericks had, of course, over a $12 million mid-level exception to be able to utilize, especially once they were able to create the room to move on from Tim Hardaway Jr. But at the same time now, a lot of that has been used on Naji Marshall. They still have about $4 million left of that they could potentially use on other free agents, depending on what's available after their pursuit of Klay Thompson is over with. I want you to take a listen, though, to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN describing how things have been playing out since the opening of free agency when it comes to Klay Thompson, particularly in the case of one LeBron James and what he has already done to try to recruit Klay to the Los Angeles Lakers and what this means for the Mavericks. Take a listen.
His agent, Greg Lawrence, tonight of Wasserman, are talking with a number of teams, including the Lakers and the Dallas Mavericks. You know, they've had conversations tonight. I'm told LeBron James called Klay Thompson right when free agency opened, 6 p.m. Eastern, reached out, talked to Klay Thompson. The expectation that I have right now is these conversations, this negotiation will go into tomorrow. There probably will not be a resolution tonight, but certainly Dallas, the Lakers, the Clippers are working to be involved in this. Those are the prominent teams for Klay Thompson, whose career is going to be somewhere other than Golden State once his free agency period is over.
So hopefully looking for resolution when it begins on Monday and beyond. LeBron James calling Klay Thompson at the very beginning of free agency to try to recruit the LA native to play with the Los Angeles Lakers. Reportedly, LeBron will be willing to take a pay cut to acquire a player like Klay Thompson, who would be tremendous for the Lakers and for your Dallas Mavericks with his ability to shoot from the three-point line. But that just gives you an indication of how much Klay Thompson is being pursued and the kind of respect that he has been looking for that allegedly he did not get in terms of the contract negotiations with the with the Golden State Warriors going back to last year, and obviously him not returning to the Golden State Warriors going into next year. A player And Klay Thompson, who, yes, defensively has seen some diminishment in him, but at the same time, a player that is still devastatingly good from the three-point line. And there have been a lot of folks who've been jumping in my mention saying, Kevin, I don't necessarily want a 34-year-old who has saw his defensive skills start to diminish, but at the same time, what he is a player that would fit extremely well into this offense for the Dallas Mavericks. Klay Thompson last year hit 219 catch and shoot three-pointers. That was second in the NBA, according to Second Spectrum, and a player that was fourth in the NBA in three-pointers made and shot nearly 39% from downtown last year. Klay Thompson can still play, and I know folks will look at the playing game where he went 0 of 10 and say, Kevin, I don't necessarily want that. But what you will have in terms of your offense being that much more improved going into next year, where last year you did not have the kind of three-point shooting down the stretch that you needed to compete, especially against a team like the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals. Klay Thompson would be an upgrade in terms of your offense. And you think about Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving's ability to penetrate and be able to find a guy like Klay Thompson, even with the movement that he does, and also his ability to shoot beyond the three-point line, whether it be in the corners, above the break, wherever it is on the three-point line, Klay Thompson is extremely proficient at, even at this stage in his career. Chris Haynes of NBA TV and, of course, on Bleacher Report, describing how the Mavericks still are the front runner at this point, even with what's happening based on what we know so far in free agency. Take a listen to Chris Haynes here.
They're a front runner in that race for Klay Thompson?
If there is a front runner, I'm going to say it's the Dallas Mavericks. He is very intrigued by that situation where he can be a guy that can fit in with what they do.
So for Chris Haynes and the report when it comes to the Dallas Mavericks, yeah, he remains the front runner moving forward to the Mavericks in terms of pursuing Klay Thompson. And for the Mavericks, let's look at the scenario that they have in terms of what their money situation looks like from a salary cap standpoint right now. A little over $173 million in terms of projected salary. If they could move out of salary in the $13 million range, and of course, in a sign and trade with Golden State into the $16.1 million trade exception that they have, that they got with terms of moving on from Tim Hardaway Jr. So for the Mavericks, if you're looking at moving on from Josh Green, who will be making nearly $13 million in the first year of his extension this upcoming season, that's the salary that you're looking at to potentially move on to terms of Golden State in order to acquire Klay Thompson, which makes a lot of sense here. Because if you feel like if you move on from Josh Green, you have your replacement in Quentin Grimes, that's an easy slot in for Grimes to be able to move into the Josh Green position, where Grimes would be continuing to develop as a three-point shooter and also as a defender as well, coming off the bench. So if you're looking at an easy way to kind of slot this in when it comes to Klay Thompson, that would be the most natural fit, especially if the Golden State Warriors are willing to take on Josh Green, which if you are watching, you have seen that there are some Warriors fans who wouldn't mind the idea of Josh Green on this team. So for the Mavericks now, how much do they continue to pursue Klay Thompson? Not only the fact that they've moved on and lost out on Derrick Jones Jr., but they were able to pivot and acquire Naji Marshall. Now Klay Thompson becomes the focal point for this team to be able to continue to improve this offseason. So if you tell me that a Mavericks offseason included moving on from Tim Hardaway Jr. and losing out on Derrick Jones Jr., but you were able to acquire Klay Thompson and also Naji Marshall, I would tell you that it's still a pretty good offseason for this team. I would still want for the Mavericks to find themselves a ball handler and a playmaker. I've seen y'all jump in my mentions with the idea of maybe bringing back Spencer Dinwiddie as a guy that can be that guy off the bench to be able to have some ball handling and some scoring ability as well. But at the same time, you are going to still need some of that if you're the Mavericks, even with the improvement on the offensive end with the acquisition of Klay Thompson, and for Naji Marshall as well, continuing to fit into the timeline nicely for the Mavericks. But all of this being said, the Mavericks, I still think, are in a good position, even with the loss of Derrick Jones Jr., because, again, how much could you bank on the idea that he was going to have another career year for the Mavericks? Yes, he fit in very well with the culture of the Dallas Mavericks, became a fan favorite, a guy that his above-the-rim ability to finish really provided a nice element, especially in transition, for the Mavericks to be able to finish out on the break. There were a lot of things that Derrick Jones Jr. brought in helping this defense turn itself around during the second half of the year. And for him, he now has a chance to continue to go get paid elsewhere, Jason Kidd, when it comes to either Jalen Brunson and now the latest example in Derrick Jones Jr. making good on his promise that he continues to get guys paid. But also, if you're looking at this as well, if you're a free agent looking at the idea of playing with the Dallas Mavericks, playing with Luka Doncic and obviously alongside Kyrie Irving as well, you're going to continue to improve your career and find yourself making money, whether it be with the Dallas Mavericks or elsewhere. And the idea of playing with Luka Doncic is a good one for you, especially now knowing how close the Mavericks are to winning a championship since they made the NBA Finals. If you're Klay Thompson and you're the position that you are in your career at 34 years of age, do you value winning a championship at this stage in a place where the Mavericks have developed the kind of culture and familial atmosphere that has seen your shoemate in terms of Kyrie Irving be able to assimilate nicely into the Mavericks? Or if your Klay, is it simply about going home where your father will be able to call your games on television? You'll be able to play in Los Angeles, retire as a Los Angeles Laker, being from Los Angeles and playing alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but not necessarily being closer to a championship than what the Mavericks are at this point. Those are the things that Klay Thompson has to value and think about at this point. It's going to be a tough decision for him because I'm sure the heartstrings will be tugged at pretty well by the Mavericks, or excuse me, by the Los Angeles Lakers based on everything that we just laid out. But if you're the Dallas Mavericks, you make an extremely compelling case for you to be the team that acquires Klay Thompson's services to be able to play alongside Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving because of not only the offensive fit for Klay, but also the fact that at his stage of his career, if he's looking to win another championship, the Mavericks right now present the best opportunity to do that with an ascending superstar in terms of Luka Doncic, who arguably is the best player in the world right now already, and Kyrie Irving, who is coming off a 25-5 year as well with the Mavericks and was terrific throughout the course of the regular season. And for young role players, whether it be Derek Lively II, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, obviously now with Naji Marshall and Quentin Grimes in the fold as well, a team that is on the right direction with really nice contracts and still the ability with flexibility to be able to have their 2025 first-round pick, their 2031 first-round pick as well, to still be able to make moves if they are able to do so. But Klay Thompson, the pursuit of him is what is now most important for the Mavericks to be able to pair alongside with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. So for me, Klay's got a real decision to make here, but the Mavericks do have the room and the creativity and the aggressiveness of this front office to make it happen. And that is one thing I continue to be impressed with when it comes to Nico Harrison and this Mavericks front office, their aggressiveness and their creativity to continue to improve this roster. And they have earned the trust of a lot of Mavericks fans, and including myself, when it comes to their ability to put a roster together and make quick decisions that not only accentuate the strengths of this Mavericks team, but also ensure that they're pairing players alongside Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving that allowed to get them the most out of this team. And you saw how that was able to happen with the acquisitions of Daniel Gafford and, of course, PJ Washington at the trade deadline. But even before that, in the draft last year, when they were able to draft Derek Lively II. But now moving forward, this team is in a win-now window to try to compete for championships, especially over the next couple of years. And the moves that they are going to make have to be looking toward that vision of how much closer can they get to winning a championship within the next 2 to 3 years, especially when you start thinking about the financial implications of a supermax contract coming for Luka Doncic at the end of this upcoming season, a potential contract extension in terms of those discussions when it comes to Kyrie Irving. The time is now, John Cena, for the Mavericks to win a championship and to ensure that they're capitalizing on this window. And Klay Thompson, yes, at even 34 years of age, fits into that win-now mentality, even with how you may feel about his defense. Yes, it would have been nice to have Klay Thompson and Derrick Jones Jr. on the same team together, but the circumstances dictated based off of Derrick Jones Jr. changing agencies and making it more difficult for the Mavericks to retain him. Shout out to Tim Cato for that report that really cast doubt on the idea that the Mavericks were able to retain him. That unfortunately came to fruition, but the Mavericks finding a way to be able to keep themselves in position to acquire a player that fits exactly what they need to do going forward. Now the pursuit of Klay Thompson continues, and if the Mavericks can land him, this will continue to be a successful offseason, building on what they were able to do to get to the NBA Finals. Again, regardless of how you feel about Klay Thompson at this point in his career, he would be a significant upgrade with his ability to shoot and be a veteran leader and presence on this team who has been there and done that and won 4 NBA championships to go alongside with Kyrie Irving. And Irving could be a recruitment tool to be able to help Klay Thompson understand what the Mavericks have. The respect that Klay would have for Jason Kidd, being a former NBA champion and a player who's been one of the best point guards in the history of the NBA and now becoming a successful coach. All of these things will continue to come into play and how the Mavericks pursue Klay Thompson, but they have the absolute ability to do so going forward. It will be interesting to see how the Mavericks continue to put themselves in position to be able to do that when it comes to Klay Thompson. But if Klay is looking for a chance to win a championship, while not only sticking it to his former team and the Golden State Warriors, he can do that much better with the Dallas Mavericks, even with the idea of going home to Los Angeles, because Klay will also have to weigh the idea, does he want to go play for a first-time head coach, even with playing with LeBron James and Anthony Davis? And what does that mean in terms of the circus of L.A. with LeBron James, now his son Bronny being there as well? Or do you want to go to a much more established group with arguably the best player in the world, a Kyrie Irving, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, 25-5-5 season at the age of 32, and a team that's clearly on the ascent when it comes to their abilities to compete for championships? If Klay is looking for that and a quote-unquote fresh start, which we reportedly heard that he wants, Dallas is the place for Klay, not necessarily Los Angeles, even with all the things from a familial standpoint that he would have in Los Angeles. But that is Klay's decision to make, and his alone. We will see how the Mavericks continue to handle their free agency and what that means for them going forward for the rest of this offseason, now that we are officially into the month of July when it comes to NBA free agency, and how the Mavericks look to get better as a team coming off their NBA Finals run. So much more here on Inside the Mavs that we'll keep you abreast on when it comes to this team. Any news, breaking news that it comes to this Mavericks team, we will be all over it when it comes to the Mavericks right here on Inside the Mavs. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, thank you so much for joining me here on this episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating. Write a review for it while you're there. If you watch this on my YouTube channel, make sure you like and comment on the video. Subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. And again, thank you so much for getting me over 6,000 subscribers here on YouTube. Looking to continue to build on it more when it comes to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.